today. Just a reminder, we are in the middle of chapter 6, guys. We're going to be covering this chapter, one more chapter, then we're going to do the second test. And chapters beyond that will not be cumulative in terms of the final. Your final in this class will be based on whatever chapters we cover after we cover the chapters in test 2. Guys, yes, ma'am. Oh, it's not up there? Let me address your question. If you will permit me to mute the screen while I check that out so I can log into my account and see what the issue is. While I'm doing that, though, however, would somebody like to grace us with a question or a comment while I am getting into Canvas? Yeah, if you guys didn't have access to the slides, please speak up. I thought I had made those publicly accessible. I apologize, guys. I didn't realize that chapter had still been locked. It is open now. You should have access to those. Guys, in the future, if there's ever a time you can't get to the slides or something, please let me know. Sometimes that stuff I assume is open. Sometimes I have forgotten to do that. So I apologize. It is open now. You should be able to get to it. So, guys, let's go ahead and jump back in, though, because we're talking about HR. We're talking about staffing. Guys, how do you feel about stores being open on Thanksgiving? How do you feel? Yes.
I'm not a fan. I feel like it's a time that you should be spending with your family, and it's like people go crazy because, I don't know, TVs are on sale for $100 at Walmart or something, and they're there standing in line rather than going and spending time with people that, like, oftentimes you only see them once or twice a year.
Isn't it funny how Black Friday has crept further and further back? People getting up at 2 a.m., then 1 a.m., and now they're actually going on Thanksgiving. Yes? Not a fan of Thanksgiving shopping. I tend to agree, and I will not judge people who go shopping on Thanksgiving, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Yes?
I also don't understand what is so likable about it, because I went Friday shopping for the first time last year with a friend of mine, and it's just, it's crowded with people, and everyone is just aggressive because everyone wants to get the perfect deal, and I don't have this, I just don't like it at all.
Nothing.
It kind of makes me sad because I feel like all the people could be at home with their families, instead they're running through malls trying to find the best deal for them.
Nothing brings home the meaning of the season of Christmas quite like people beating each other up for flat screen TVs. I think I remember reading that in the Bible somewhere, that one of the main reasons why God sent His only begotten Son to earth was so we could all get really good deals on consumer electronics. I think I did read something about that. It is ironic to me that people celebrate Thanksgiving by saying, we should give thanks for what we have, and now let's go buy some more stuff. It is kind of ironic. Does anybody go shopping on Thanksgiving? You do? You go shopping on Thanksgiving?
On Thanksgiving, but the day after.
So you do? You go on Black Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you get some killer deals. I personally don't enjoy it. I would rather be home. I'd rather be sleeping in, knocking off my tryptophan buzz from eating all that turkey. But if you want to be out there, that's totally acceptable too. Yes?
Probably Cyber Monday. You still get the same deals, but it's just
Which is bigger, Black Friday or Cyber Monday? Financial. It is now. The week of Cyber Monday, between that Monday and the Friday, the week after Thanksgiving, will be the biggest retail week of the year in the United States. More people will buy stuff online and in person that week than any other week of the year. So it's a big deal. I think that there are some people it makes sense why they're working on Thanksgiving. If you're a police officer, a firefighter, a nurse, that makes sense to me. I definitely would like to see people get some time off to go work with or spend time with their families. I will say, though, I give thanks on Thanksgiving for the good folks who work in convenience stores So when we're trying to make our way to our family gatherings, we can stop and get gas and coffee when we need it. And by the way, thank God for those folks. Nothing really irritates me quite so much as people busting on whether or not they didn't get enough bacon on their sheet sandwich on social media. I'm just grateful that somebody's out at 3 in the morning when I have to stop and get gas to give me a sandwich. It's pretty awesome you can do that. Guys, we left off talking about supply and demand in terms of understanding what's going on in the labor markets today. We're going to move very quickly on this stuff because it's pretty direct, but it's important for us to know in terms of why this stuff affects us. I know I've repeatedly said it this semester, but we've got a very low national unemployment rate. It doesn't tell the whole story, though. Our national unemployment rate is hovering just beneath 4%. The term for that basically is full employment. The labor force participation rate is much lower, however. Does anybody have any idea, without looking it up, what our labor force participation rate is? And can you tell me the difference between that and an unemployment rate? Does anybody know? Here's the difference. Your unemployment rate is, if everybody in the world is looking for a job, everybody in the United States, I should say, what percentage of people who are actively trying to find a job can't get a job? That's your unemployment rate. Your labor force participation rate, however, is how much percentage out of 100% out of all eligible people who could work are actually working. In the United States, anybody have any guess out of 100% what our national labor force participation rate is right now? Do you know what it is? Any guesses? Yeah, it's 65%. So of all able-bodied people in the United States who could work, only 65% are working. That's the lowest labor force participation rate we've had since the 1970s. What's going on here, guys? Why do you think we have such a low labor force participation rate? Any thoughts? Yes? Well, actually, it has to do with the population, but it's probably the other end. We as a country in the United States are actually one of the older countries in the world in terms of percentage of the population over retirement age. So age is definitely part. Is there another thing that may be playing into this? In the recession of 2008, a lot of people lost their jobs. And a lot of people during that period also fell out of the employment market. They basically said, I'm done working. I'm done. I'm out of the labor force. I'm done working. Guys, please, just give me a half hour. We are talking about stuff that does affect what your employment's going to look like here. That affects how many people we can actually reach, our applicant population and our applicant pool. We're going to explain how this funnel works. It's just like marketing, guys. The other reasons behind this stuff, why it's so important. If we got 4% unemployment and employers are saying we need to reach additional people, well, what can we do to get to that other 35%? If you're McDonald's and you're Wendy's and you're Chick-fil-A, where are you recruiting from, guys? What's a non-traditional population you're recruiting these days? That's exactly right. We're recruiting more elderly people into the population. If you counted everybody you could actually hire, everybody in the United States who's available for hire, that's your labor force population. So in the United States, we know right now we've got 35% of that labor force population that's not even participating in the labor force. Then we've got what we refer to as the applicant population. That's what percentage we could actually reach with a given medium. Let me give you an example. If everybody in the United States had internet, if we have 100%, everybody has internet, our applicant population that we could reach via email or online advertisement would be 100%. If 70% of our population has internet, our applicant population of using internet recruiting methods would be 70%. The people who you actually take a look at are your applicant pool. The people who actually either apply or get recruited are your applicant pool. It's just like a marketing funnel. We got to keep records on all this stuff, guys. One of the main reasons we do is to make sure that we're not discriminating against people who are applying for jobs. But you want to keep records of this stuff regardless to make sure you know if people are actually applying. Guys, if you're spending money on internet advertising or print advertising or what have you, you've still got to know if you're spending money for good reasons or bad. Are you actually getting responses from these folks? In terms of the way that the unemployment rate actually affects us, guys, the higher the unemployment rate goes, the more it's an employer's market. That being said, if you've got desirable skills, it doesn't matter if there's a high unemployment rate, you'll probably still get a job. And there are some jobs that are sort of recession-proof. Can somebody think of a job that, no matter what, is still going to need somebody to do it, even during a recession? Somebody whose job is unlikely to go. Yes? For sure. Even during recessions, people still get sick. What else is sort of a recession-proof job? Yes?
Teachers, like elementary and high school.
Still need people educating our kids. Although they may not hire as many people, they don't usually cut too many of those jobs. I'm thinking of one job that no matter what, we're always going to need. It's kind of morbid, but yes. Police for sure. And there's one other job I would say is recession-proof, and that are morticians. People are always going to keep dying. I'm going to tell you something that's honest and true. My family doctor's wife is a mortician. And the joke in that family is, if we don't get you at one end, we're going to get you at the other. I think it's a conflict of interest. If you're married to an undertaker and you're a physician, that's a conflict of interest. But I digress. If you have a high skill, no matter the unemployment rate, you're probably still going to have an easier time finding work than somebody with a low skill set. That being said, guys, I was working in technology when the last Great Recession hit, and I very well remember people who had PhDs, people who were normally six-figure salary people, who were applying for jobs that were entry-level. You had a person who was running an IT department for a big company, and all of a sudden, now they're applying for a $35,000 job. It happens. Here's one of the other things that's happened too, guys. Let's talk about the unemployment rate and recruiting for a second. Let's say, for example, I'm making six figures. I'm making $150,000 a year working for a company. I get laid off. I am counted among the unemployment statistics when the unemployment rate rises. I get a job managing a McDonald's for $35,000 a year. Do I come off the unemployment rolls? I do. So I'm technically employed now, but I'm not making what I was making before. So the unemployment rate also doesn't tell the whole story on this stuff. We have different markets, too, that we recruit for. We have the industry and occupational markets. If you're talking about anything industrial, people who are doing work with heavy machinery, for example, then we have education and technical people who need typically white-collar kinds of skills. And we also can break down our labor markets by geography. Are you hiring people for a specific region? For example, right now something's happening outside that might scare some people from wanting to work in this area. What is it? It's snowing, man. It is snowing, and some people won't move here no matter how much you pay them. You can recruit people internal to your company or external. We all know what the advantages are of increasing, or how do I want to phrase this? We all know what the advantages are of pulling people from other places into our companies. What are some of the advantages of promoting or recruiting from within? What's an advantage to giving somebody, recruiting an internal audience as opposed to an external? Yes? Less training? Are there other advantages? Is it cheaper or more expensive to recruit internally? Yeah, you don't have to advertise. You can post on a job board, for example. It's great. The only bad part is that you're not getting any new skill sets in, and you're also robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you recruit somebody internally, you're leaving another opening you're ultimately going to have to fill. So, guys, in terms of recruiting itself, technology obviously is kind of our main way of doing this at this point. Let me ask you, by show of hands, how many of you are already participating in some kind of electronic job postings? So you're creating profiles, LinkedIn, for example. What other services are you using so far? Anybody using Handshake? Yeah, so there are ways to do that. You're setting yourself up to be what we refer to as a passive job candidate. An example of that is somebody, for example, who maybe is not necessarily looking for a job actively, but something shows up on their LinkedIn, something shows up on their Handshake, for example, maybe they'd be interested. So passive job candidates are people who maybe aren't looking, but could be interested. And when there's a low unemployment rate, those are people who are looking to jump jobs based on frictional unemployment. They're ready to leave. There's lots of ways that we recruit online. Everybody knows that we use job boards, we use websites, we use online recruiting. We can also use video recruiting. By the way, we were talking about this in my communications class the other day. I'd love to get your take on it. How many of you have ever done an interview over video conference? What's difficult about it? Because it's more difficult than an in-person interview. What's difficult about video interview?
First, they gotta know that I don't have one, and I haven't like Skype, and then my camera wasn't working, so I couldn't the person couldn't see me. You can have like technical issues.
So actual technical issues could break it up as well. And the other thing too, how many of you by show of hands have ever made a video call using a computer or a cell phone? Okay, what are some of the issues in making those calls in the first place? Do the calls drop on you sometimes? The video frame freezes? I mean, it's like, for example, if you're in the middle of a conversation, and you know it's always going to happen, the frozen moment, if somebody gets your frozen face, is going to be sometime when you're like this. And they're going to be looking at it like for 3 seconds, and you're like, are you still there? And you're looking back at them like, and it doesn't make a good impression on the job. It's just like anything else. Anytime there's a lag, the conversation is tough. So I'm really not surprised that the video stuff hasn't taken off as quickly as a lot of companies thought it would. Now, has anybody here ever had to post a video resume? Have you even heard of this? Imagine this, guys. Let's say, for example, I gave all of you in here 1 minute to talk to a camera and record yourself and pitch yourself to an employer. Why is that so hard to do? Yes?
I actually remember when I made a highlight video of me playing soccer when before I got here, and then I had to talk about myself too and the position I'm playing, and that was already hard because I had to laugh at myself because I did it like 20 times in my living room, just talking to the camera without anyone having interviewed me, just because I had to think of some information I wanted to share with coaches or whatever, and I just felt weird. Yeah, talking to a camera about my skills or whatever I have. So it's just kind of awkward.
It's tough. I mean, I'll tell you guys, I teach online a lot. And when I record a 45-minute lecture for an online class, it's twice the amount of effort, maybe 3 times as it is to talking to a room full of people. Even on our worst days, when it's cold and it's miserable out there and everybody's a little tired, it's still so much nicer to talk to people than it is to talk to a camera. And that's why I think this maybe hasn't taken off as much. Now, what you may start seeing, too, a lot of companies are jumping into something we call gamification. And that's giving a chance for people to actually play a game on a site to see if somebody is actually good at a particular skill. Sometimes they don't even realize they're being recruited. Here's a great example. A few years ago, the United States Army came out with a game called U.S. Army. And it was a first-person shooter game. Not much different than like, I'm trying to give you a good example, like Doom or Duke Nukem or the old 90s kind of games. What most people didn't realize, it was a recruiting tool. It was actually a way to see people, number one, who were interested in armed service, and two, who might have the right skill set to be able to operate a drone, for example. So one of the big issues can be, too, guys, in terms of how we screen people. How many of you have ever gone to career services here, first of all, to do a mock interview or have your resume looked at? Yeah, it's helpful. Emily, when you went, what did you have done? So what kind of feedback did they give? So they added kind of the depth and breadth of your experience. Here's what happens, guys. Sometimes when we're using internet screening software, we're using software, you're uploading a resume. And most of us use, for example, Microsoft Word to do our resumes. We're using Google Docs or whatever. When we scan this stuff in, sometimes keywords get hit and sometimes keywords get missed. Let me give you an example. If you were applying for a job in human resources, and maybe you had listed your course experiences as human resources, but you listed it as human resource. Because of that one letter, the optical scan rejects your resume because you don't have what they were exactly looking for. We miss out on all kinds of qualified candidates, sometimes because the AI just isn't that good. What can also happen sometimes when we're scanning these resumes, people get discounted from positions because their experience is listed in a different order. And sometimes, for example, we will use this kind of scanning software, or companies will use this kind of scanning software to discriminate against people through things like age discrimination. What's something on my resume that could subject me to age discrimination? Think about what might be on my resume. Graduation date? Yeah, exactly. Kent Tonkin, class of 91. That middle-aged guy. We don't want a guy that age, especially a guy who came from where you came from. So we could also be doing discrimination based on location or other things. If you're doing other kinds of internet recruiting, for example, if you're scanning resumes, if that stuff's ending up in a database, you're also responsible to keep that stuff secure, so you're protecting personal information. So the advantages are, yeah, it's cheap, it's easy, it whittles down our applicant pool. Our disadvantages are we miss out oftentimes on a lot of good candidates for something as stupid as a keyword, for example. And we've also got, for example, we've got people who are submitting resumes who have better word processing skills or better technology skills. They may have a better looking resume than somebody else, or let me rephrase that. Somebody who does not have the technology skills might not be putting out as high quality of a resume as somebody with better technical skills, resulting in them getting better attention for a job. Before we continue, guys, because I'm getting a little tongue-tied here, can I have a question or a comment from anywhere in the room? About anything, anyone, or anything that is on the mind. We all know it's cold, so that one's been taken. What would you like to ask today? Oh, I'm sure you have a question about something. Yes, sir.
Do you like the cold?
The cold? I actually do, actually. I don't mind it. I think the best part about the cold is it feels so amazing when you come in. You know, it's like, I'm serious about that. Like, my favorite thing about this time of year, my wife likes to cook. And so I'll come in on a night like this, and she'll have something like pot roast cooking, or chicken, or mashed potatoes, or turkey. And you walk in out of the cold, and you're like, man, this is terrible out here. And that whiff of fresh food hits you when you walk in the door. And you realize pretty soon, even as cold as you are, your belly's going to be filled with homemade gravy-covered goods. And if gravy can't make your day better, I can't help it. So, seriously, gravy makes everything better, doesn't it? I love gravy. And anything with gravy says comfort food to me. So yeah, I do like the cold sometimes. Anybody else have a question before we continue? This is funny. I feel bad for we got Jared and Emily who had to endure 2 classes today where everybody's is feeling a little down today. No offense to anybody. I think everybody's a little down because of the weather. So what can we do to get you guys in for 10 more minutes? Is there anything from this side of the table I can do? I need 10 more minutes. What can I do? Oh, cool. That's easy. Can it be one of my favorite recent ones? All right. We are gonna watch a clip of the. We've got an organizational database, which means we're keeping an inventory of who we have in our office with specific skills. Why would we keep that information? Well, if we got an opening, we can actually recruit people to fill it. Sometimes these organizational databases are formal. Sometimes they are things that we keep based on our own personal knowledge. For example, you talk to somebody in this building. Randy Fry knows a little bit about everybody on this campus. If you want to know how he can recruit someone, sometimes it's just knowing who's good at something else. I was recruited by Dr. Fry when I was working in a different position on campus based on what he knew about my personal skills. In a larger organization, however, you might have a formal database to be able to tie this stuff to specific KSAs. In addition, if you're recruiting internal or external, you're going to do what we refer to as a job posting. Inside a facility, for example, inside an organization, you could have a job posting that's only open to people who work for that organization. We call that an internal posting. And what's great about that, if you're recruiting internally, for the same reason we just talked about, people who are already adept with the organization, people who are already skilled, already know their organization, for example, are able to be easily put into new positions. They're familiar with the employer, and again, if you have employees referring each other, sometimes in larger organizations, you even have what we refer to as referral bonus programs. You might get a gift card, for example, if you're referring somebody for a hire. So some of the other ways we can recruit, again, we can refer each other. People can refer previous employees. In other words, it's not uncommon for people to leave and come back. We call those employees boomerangs. Has anybody ever seen a real boomerang? What do people use them for in Australia? They use them for hunting. So a boomerang, when you throw it, it comes back to you, and if you know how to catch it, you will. We've got employees that are boomerangs too. Sometimes people leave and they realize it wasn't as good as they thought it would be, and they come back. In addition, you have people who maybe retire or leave your company or your university, and they have networks of alumni that they can pull upon as well. That's what we refer to as alumni networks. We already talked a bit about why internal recruiting might be bad, but here are the pros and cons illustrated for you. The Cliff Notes are something like this. If you promote people internally and you recruit internally, you're showing, number one, that you care about your people. What else are you showing? You're showing you know who they are. You spent time to get to know somebody. You also give people motivation to say, maybe if I work harder, I can find my way into those areas as well. It makes succession planning a breeze. The biggest reason that internal recruiting can be bad is you don't get any new ideas. You get what we refer to as inbreeding. Here's another example. Let's say, for example, we've got these 5 people have all decided to apply for the same position, and they're all really good candidates. They all work for the same company, but Lily gets the job. How does everybody else feel? There was one managerial position. You guys all applied. Lily got it. How do you guys feel? She might be some of your bosses now. Yeah, you could feel or jealous, or passed over, or why did that person get the job and I didn't? Here's the other trick too, guys. When you get promoted within a company, a lot of things can change. Something as fundamental as saying, who do I eat lunch with, changes when you get a promotion sometimes, particularly if you move into management. And here's the other part too. Sometimes there will be managers who will actively sabotage people from getting promotions because they don't want to lose good employees. They want to keep them under their thumb and in their place where they're making good use of them. Some of the other places, for example, we can recruit in the old days, or if you're recruiting older audiences, we might still be using newspapers, magazines, all of these things. But it's all going the way of the internet these days. And it's not just because we're trying to reach a younger audience. We can also track where our money is going. You can easily see how many hits you got on a website. What was the open rate for the email? All these things. It's easier to know how you're spending money and why you're spending it and what kind of results that you're getting. So some of the other things you can also do, guys. We have a group called the Journal of Higher Education, for example. And that is a journal specifically for colleges and universities. We can do job postings in there. It's a very easy way to reach our target audience. If you're a member of a professional organization, is anybody here a member of any kind of organization outside of the university? Are you a member of a Greek group? Are you a member of a club? Raise your hand if you're a member of a fraternity or sorority. Those are the same kind of referral networks we're talking about. If you're a member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, for example, that could be an example of an affiliation. If you're a member of the Society for Human Resource Management, or if you're a CPA or a member of a professional group, those are other ways we can recruit. We can go into those areas. We can also schedule interviews and active hiring. With 4% unemployment, a lot of companies are basically saying, show up for an interview. We might give you a job that day. We can also use what we refer to as employment agencies. I'll tell you a story about this, and we're going to call it a day. After this story, I had a friend back in 2008 who was an engineer. This guy was a mechanical electrical engineer. We're talking somebody who went to school to know how to do wiring diagrams, how to design complex systems, all of these things. During the recession in 2008, he got downsized from his company. He was living in Ohio, and he had to pay an employment agency to find a job for him. This is how bad it was in 2008. For 1 year past the date he was hired, they were entitled to 30% of his salary. So he had to work for them for a year, paying $3 out of every $10 he was making back to them to pay for the fee that he had negotiated. That's how bad it was in 2008. Here's the second part for why it was so bad for my poor friend Dan. How many of you like cheese? I love cheese. I could eat cheese every day. Does anybody have a friend who really doesn't like cheese? People who don't like cheese really, really don't like cheese. Well, imagine you're one of those people who really doesn't like cheese. That's my friend Dan. The job that he got, that he was paying 30% of his salary to keep, was to manage production at a cheese factory. Could you imagine if you're spending 40 to 60 hours a week managing a cheese factory, you hate cheese, and you're paying 30% of your salary? That is a rough way to go. So that being said, because I left you with a cheese analogy, and sometimes cheese sticks on ice, and today I feel like that's as far as we're going to get. I know when it's time to stop, and the look on your faces says it's time to stop, so we're going to stop. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you feel better Monday. I do.